All right, we are recording, so I'm going to get Adam, who actually translated this manual, to do the reading, and then we're going to go through and just interpret it. So, yeah, just the first section, if you could take it away, Adam.
Excellent. Right, so here we have the first chapter, or the first play. The way of putting the hand to the sword. It is a little bit verbose here. I have seen, my serene king, that the common use, of for better or for worse, but the idiotic people who make a profession of arms, that have composed various volumes in this science on the manner in which a man must present himself to bring the hand to the sword, by which they all draw in a natural inclination by placing the right leg forward. They take no notice of the fact that the perfection of this science is above all to do nothing dangerous or to lose any time. Therefore, in order that your majesty can by his highest intellect recognize the reasons that lead to this bare and very real truth and fact, I claim that if a man wants to put his hand to the sword and he has the right foot forward, it is at this time that he is in danger, because the enemy who stands before him can take his arm. In addition, this way is also inconvenient. By putting his hand to the sword in the manner described above, you will not only be able to take it out of the scabbard by a foot. This will not happen if you hold your left foot forward, as you can see in the figure. Positioning this way, you can easily draw the sword from the scabbard and in the same instant find yourself on outside guard, as it is in the following drawing number 2, which we'll get to later. Without any loss of time and without the risk of giving time or an opportunity to your adversary to be able to bind it. Then, to have an even greater advantage, when you draw from the scabbard, it is useful at the time of the drawing to know what to do with the left hand. This is commonly placed on the belt of the sword, and at the moment the drawing pulls back on the scabbard. In doing so, you draw the sword faster. This advantage is only gained by pulling the scabbard backwards. In case you find yourself too close to your enemy and have no time to draw your sword, you can, if properly placed as above, immediately turn the point of your sword with the entire scabbard, and in that same instant, leaving the left leg in the same position, pull the right leg backwards quickly in a reverse lunge, while putting the hand to the sword, which will be done faster because of the backward step with the right leg. You should, with practice, be able to put your hand to the sword like another would to the dagger. I could have stated many other reasons, but I seek to address in my writings only the necessary points, so that your majesty will taste only the best fruit of my compositions, which I wish to give you, removing any proximity which could give you some trouble.
Okay, so thank you. I love how, in spite of being very, very long-winded, he says that he only wants to give the necessary points. Although that is actually a feature of like older periods where people were just not as used to reading, is that they tend to be more long-winded, and also periods where people didn't necessarily have, you know, a strong or as strong editing tool.
Are a little wordy and descriptive, but it gets more precise as you move on.
I see. So it's just there was a little bit in that where which I was trying to sort of envisage what you were doing, what you're saying as you went, but there was a little bit where there was some feedback at my end and I couldn't quite hear you. So what did he say to do with the right foot? So he says to come on guard, place your left foot forward, and then place your have your left foot forward, have your hand on the sword. What does he say? What does he say to do with the right foot? Does he say to like step back, or does he say to step around, like to step around?
With the right foot, right hand.
Right foot. What's he doing with the right foot?
One moment. I believe it's the second part. If you are too close to your opponent, you can flip the entire sword around while still in the scabbard. And then with your right foot, you do a reverse lunge.
Okay, yep. Also, yeah. Actually, I'm just going to take my earpiece out so I won't be able to hear anyone who's going to get up. Do you mind if I quickly get you to stop screen sharing? Okay. Thank you for that. All right, so if I'm reading this right, what he's basically suggesting, this is my improvised sword belt, is just a belt loop. But what he's suggesting is that you step back, and the idea is that you're getting as much distance or as much distance between your sword hand and the scabbard. Because if you're like this and you're coming forward, outside of the fact that your arm is at risk of being attacked.
His first piece states not to have the right foot forward because your opponent can grab your arm.
Beg your pardon, sorry?
Sorry. Yeah, the first piece states that you don't have the right foot forward because your opponent will grab your arm.
Yep. Yeah, if you're standing close. Yeah, and so you're sort of looking to get distance back. Yeah, so move, keep the arm protected. So is that assuming that then assuming this is a very, very close range system, like you're going to start with your opponent in grab distance, basically, or is this just him saying, or do you think that's him just kind of installing the virtues of the system, going, do it my way because otherwise your arm's going to get grabbed?
I think it's just covering all your bases.
Yeah, so kind of like a uniform.
It is possible you draw your sword at a very close range because that's kind of the point where you'd get angry and it would come to the point where you draw your sword. But I wouldn't recommend doing it at this range, regardless of which foot you have forward.
I don't. That's fair. I generally recommend getting in sword fights. Okay, so just. I don't know who else. I don't know if anyone else has got a big enough room to actually mime the motion. But I might give it a crack just from here if that's okay. So sort of. So we're starting. Move back so you can see my feet. So we're starting basically close, but with the right shoulder forward. You're coming back, and he says basically reverse lunge to come roughly out to here, although probably a bit smoother when you're not drawing from a belt loop. So coming to sort of this kind of position, which I think should probably check what the outside guard is specifically. But yeah, it's kind of, you're essentially moving away, which kind of reminds me of in a lot of later period bayonet manuals, the way they always advise you to turn is you always turn on your front foot, because if you do that, you'll always be creating a little bit of distance from your opponent. So if you've got someone coming at you to the side, you always turn on your front foot so that you get just that little bit of distance from them before you do anything, and kind of gain that little bit of time. If that makes sense.
If I may, he doesn't actually talk about footwork during the main draw that he talks about. The reverse lunge is used, I believe, for the second part, where he flips the entire sword in the scabbard and then reverse lunges so he can draw it out of the scabbard while the scabbard is pointed towards your opponent.
Okay. Yeah, so sort of twist it round. So
that way the scabbard acts as a kind of defense pointing towards your opponent while you're able to draw the sword if you're too close.
Yeah. Actually, there's so I'm pretty sure there's a similar technique in Fiore where if you're attacked, what you do is you basically and you don't have your sword drawn, you just kind of flick the scabbard up so that it's in the way of any kind of incoming attack. Yeah, sort of. I don't know. Do you think it's more you're coming to a position, like to a defensive position, and then or to a position then drawing, as opposed to doing what's maybe more intuitive, which is trying to get the sword out as quickly as possible?
I think that his main draw, which is just draw it out to an outside guard, which is a fingernails down position with the blade flat. You can see it in image too, is just get it out as quickly as possible. If your opponent is too close, that for you to be able to do that effectively, you want to put your scabbard in the way so that, to kind of defend yourself while you're able to lunge backwards to draw the sword.
Yeah. Okay, it's almost tempting to try and get a scabbard, or like do this get some swords with scabbards that we can still fence with, and actually try it out and try out sort of what happens when you enter into a battle without your sword drawn. That'd be very cool. So does anyone else have any insights on that? Or anything they want to add to sort of what's kind of been discussed? Also, does anyone else want to try and demonstrate what's actually being done?
Well, if I may, it would be jumping ahead, I suppose, to understand exactly what the outside guard is. So I can't quite envision what he means by. Sorry, but the draw when your opponent is too close makes a lot of sense. The reverse lunge, that seems quite simple, really. So I was just practicing it, and I'll just do it again.
Sorry, I just couldn't quite hear you. Then there was a bit of feedback in the line. Right. Cool. Moshe's going to have a crack at demonstrating.
Sorry, I'm not sure how much people can see of this, but but basically lunging backwards with your scabbard pointed forward means that you're drawing the sword back, so that the tip is not even past your body really. So it would be entirely impossible for an opponent to stop you from doing that. And then you're in a position to reverse your direction, thrust, cut, do whatever. So yeah, that seems really cool.
So I grabbed my scabbard, and even though it's a soft one, this is great. I can already feel the movement. This is great. Because I've ended up in this kind of position in big LARP, in LARPs and stuff, where the fight is just happening out of nowhere, which is a lot different to actual fencing. So his first position being here, pulling it out, coming to that outside guard, and then pointing it at your opponent, doing that step behind lunge, open, boom. And you've already got a whole lunge worth of distance as well, which is really cool. I needed this.
There's also the interesting point that drawing forwards towards your opponent, even an unarmed opponent, if they're closing in, they can actually prevent you from fully drawing the sword. Whereas if you're drawing away from them, they're just getting closer to your tip. The tip comes online faster than any other way.
Yeah. But what's actually, when I did Japanese martial arts, because a lot of those emphasize drawing the sword, the counter to the sword draws in some of them is basically if you don't have a sword and your opponent is drawing their sword on you, you just rush them somehow and just basically grab their hand. So this seemingly would be quite an effective counter to that. Which I think there is something similar I've seen in a Japanese sword system where if you think you're going to be rushed and you don't want to do a draw strike, what you do is you basically turn to face the sword away and then pull it out. Although they don't do the whole sort of reverse lunge thing.
But in the Japanese system, they also do with the left hand as it holds the scabbard. You pull the scabbard back as you draw, so it's not a full draw from the scabbard. You sort of tone down a couple of inches of draw power by pulling the scabbard back. So did that same thing as Mosh just did. They would draw it straight out in front. The tip pointing straight at them is a step back. The step back would effectively be the draw.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Cool. So does anyone have any sort of further comments they want to make?
I was wondering if the verb take in whatever the line was, the opponent can take your arm. Is that, if that's any more specific in the Italian?
I'd have to look at it in more detail than I can just at a glance. So I'm sorry, I can't comment on that at the current time.
Oh, no problem.
Cool. If no one's got any more comments on that section, we might move on. So I might just take a second to pause recording.